All right, we're live. I hope this is working. Joe, we'll do the pod like normal. So, what is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked In Sports Podcast. First ever live recording, live out on YouTube and X at the moment. Hopefully, I hope it's working. But Joe, how you doing?
Not too bad, man. Not too bad. Excited to chat it up about college football and the Wild West of the portal and coaching changes. Still gives us some stuff to chat about here in the off season.
Yeah, it's been a wild few weeks post national championship. Obviously, we did the Nick Saban podcast as our most recent one, and there's been a lot of fallout since. We've had multiple coaches around the country get raises. Sark, Mike Norvell at Florida State got raises as a result of just trying to lure them away from Alabama. Those guys didn't even interview, and they end up going with Mr. Kalen DeBoer coming over from Washington, who literally coached in the national championship game a few weeks ago, and he takes his talents to Alabama. I think my biggest thing with him, and we'll get into this hire, is he is a bona fide winner, right? He 104-12 overall record. He went 25-3 in his tenure at Washington, won 3 NAIA national titles at Sioux Falls in South Dakota. So he is a winner. He's been to a few different stops, Fresno State, Washington. He was the OC at Indiana when Penix was there in 2019. So he has a lot of experience, and he's a winner. He's a younger coach, 49. I think maybe the biggest knock on him in this hire, and we'll talk about the portal chaos and everything that's kind of coming as a result, is he doesn't really have a ton of experience in the South. And that's something that, a lot of SEC coaches have when they make the step up to head coaching. I think of Hugh Freeze going back to Auburn, had that experience at Ole Miss. Billy Napier, even though he, maybe didn't have experience in the SEC as a head coach, he was at Louisiana. So a lot of these guys have ties to the South when they come over to the SEC, and Kalen DeBoer doesn't have that. So there's a lot of different nuances and things that are going to come up as a result of this hire. But what were kind of your initial impressions and reactions from DeBoer to Bama?
Yeah, and before I touch on DeBoer, Jimmy Sexton, college football coach, agent extraordinaire. He was the agent for Nick Saban, who retires and was already the highest paid coach. Also the agent for Dan Lanning, Mike Norvell, and Sark. They all get extensions to stay. And then he places his final client, Kalen DeBoer at Alabama. So he got all his guys to pay. He got all the money for those guys. So he had a nice spin while off of Saban leaving. And to touch on DeBoer, I'll be interested. The same thing. I think that's the biggest question is he's a bona fide winner. He's a proven winner wherever he's gone. Sioux Falls, Fresno State, Washington, all the way to the national championship for that program. But it is that, not being in the South, he needs to be a better recruiter. We'll talk about the portal, guys leaving there, guys decommitting. It's a difference, recruiting to Washington versus Alabama. It's a different style of play. The conference is different. I think he can get it done. But, to follow up a guy like Saban and you're not, a guy who's coaching the SEC, I think they do take a step back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's he wasn't necessarily a dominant recruiter at Washington, and was the knock on him. So I think big thing for him is getting the right staff in place. It looks like he's getting Ryan Grubb as the offensive coordinator to come over from Washington, which is a huge deal, especially when you got Jalen Milroe at quarterback. We talked about it in the podcast after the Alabama-Michigan game. Michigan tried to make him a passer in the first half, and obviously they have an elite secondary, and they were able to shut him down. But you want him to throw the ball at this stage of his career. What scares you the most about Milroe is his legs. Mm-hmm. So if Grubb can come in there with DeBoer, they're probably the best head coach offensive coordinator combo in the country right now. If those two guys can come in there and make Milroe a passer, I think that excites me, and that's something to watch for Alabama football next season. It looks like they're bringing in Kane Womack from South Alabama to be he was the head coach there. He's going to be their DC. I don't think it's official yet, but that's kind of the rumor around the street right now. Those two guys, DeBoer and Womack, were on the staff at IU in 2019, serving as the OC and DCs respectively. So I think he has to get a good staff around him, maybe a staff with more ties to the South to help recruiting, and go from there. They will take a step back. And I think that's interesting to think about, like just the expectations for Alabama fans and people, just college football fans in general, is they're not going to be 11-1, 12-0, and making the playoff every single year. I mean, now it is a 12-team playoff, so maybe they have a better chance of making the playoff every year, but they're not going to be as dominant as they were under Saban. And I think that's totally fair. I don't know if that's necessarily possible in this era of college football anymore. The closest thing that we have to it right now is probably what Kirby Smart's doing at Georgia, but he still has a long way to go before he reaches where Nick Saban was. So it will be interesting to follow. I mean, we've already seen a pretty big mass exodus of guys leaving Alabama, some surprising names as well. Obviously the biggest one being Caleb Downs. And we can kind of talk about the portal now, or we can stick with the Alabama taking a step back. I don't know. Where do you want to go with this?
Yeah, I mean, I think there has to be expectations set. They have the greatest coach in college football history, in my opinion. And the run that they had at Alabama, I don't know if that ever gets matched again, especially in today's day and age. Like you said, Georgia's the closest, but even this year, they barely missed out on the playoffs. So going to the 12 teams, I think their expectation would be they at least get in that 12 teams next year. But honestly, if they don't make it, you got to give this guy, a couple of years to build his type of program, get his guys in there. They're losing a lot of those guys Saban recruited that are not only just upperclassmen going to the portal, but guys from this recruiting class. So it's a different recruiting class they'll bring this year, with this late start coming to Alabama. So give them some leeway, especially this year. But they do have Milroe. They do have guys coming back and a really good team. So I think it wouldn't be out of the question to make the playoff again and be in that hunt still. But yeah, you got to, recenter expectations. He's not going to go to the national championship every year. He's not going to be, they're not going to be Alabama of old. They're not going to get the number one recruiting class every year. I think they're going to be really good. They're going to have good recruiting classes. It's a great coach. If he gets Grubb down there, I love that as the OC. Like, they're going to get their guys in there. They already got Austin Mack to transfer over from Washington, their prize quarterback recruit. So I think it's just about resetting expectations. At any program, they're not going to follow what Saban just did or that stretch of history, whether it's Alabama or somewhere else. So it's just resetting those expectations. And, for the fan base, probably not going to be happy if they aren't winning every year. But I think the administration knows this guy can't do what Saban just did. It's nearly impossible.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a tough pill to swallow for the Alabama fan base. I mean, we know just how spoiled they've been over the past, decade and a half. I think it will be interesting to see how the administration handles it. What if he goes 9-3 or 8-4 next year? I mean, they have a pretty tough schedule. They have Georgia in the regular season. They have to go to Wisconsin on the road. Might be a little bit of a revamped Wisconsin team next year. That's like in week 2. Still a game, a game in the Saban era that they would have no trouble with, but maybe in this new era might be a little bit of a test, a tough road test. So how does the administration handle it if they go 9-3? Or have what they consider to be a really disappointing season in year one? Do they just cut bait right away? I hope not after one season, but if they have 2 seasons of kind of establishing this new era of Alabama football, and maybe it doesn't come with a massive amounts of winning, we'll see. It'll be interesting to see how the admin handles the pressure, because there will be external pressure from the fan base if they lose even 2 games in the regular season next year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and with a leader like Milroe, as long as everything looks like he'll be back, as long as he's there, with these guys around him, he's gonna be a Heisman candidate, going into the season. So there will be high expectations. But 9-3, it's like, hey, maybe you lose a close game, it just doesn't go your way this year. But I think as a coaching staff, an administration, they need to back him at that point. Certainly if they go like 6-6, that'd be insane. But to go undefeated next year would be pretty crazy in my mind.
I'm just gonna pull up their 2024 schedule real quick. So toughest games probably at Wisconsin. They go home versus Georgia, at Tennessee, home versus Missouri. Missouri is going to be really good next year, top 10 team. At LSU, and then at Oklahoma, and home versus Auburn. So it's a tough schedule. I mean, it's again, past Alabama, you'd expect them to handle it. New era Alabama, and we can talk about the guys they've lost, which it is truly staggering. You would have expected a decent amount of guys to leave, but they had, their best player, arguably the best, not arguably, the very best freshman in all of college football last year, Caleb Downs, their safety, entered the portal Wednesday, committed to Ohio State last night. Huge get for the Buckeyes, who are basically establishing or building an Avengers level team right now for next season. They're going to be really, really good. And we can talk about them in the coming podcast as we start to look toward 2024. He's going to Ohio State. 107 tackles last year, 2 picks, 3 pass breakups, 1 forced fumble. All SEC first team as a freshman. Won the Sean Alexander Award given to the best freshman in the country, and he was the SEC Freshman of the Year as well. So huge name. It was down to Georgia and Ohio State. He's from Georgia, right outside Athens, actually, right outside Atlanta. And Georgia hired the former Alabama DB coach, Travius Robinson. I think that's how you say his first name. Travius Robinson as their co-DC and safeties coach to help lure Downs to Georgia, and he ends up going to Ohio State. They're throwing an insane amount of money at their team next year. But it kind of goes back to this whole portal window thing that we're kind of experiencing in college football, where you have the first portal window, which is right after the regular season ends, which is December 4th to January 2nd. And then you have the spring window. So after spring ball, April 16th to April 30th. But after the departure of a head coach, players they're afforded an additional 30 days to enter the portal and commit to another school. The issue that I have with this, and I think a lot of other teams or a lot of other fans have, is Alabama, their players can enter the portal, but Alabama can't bring anybody in through the portal, or they can't bring these guys that entered the portal in previous windows. They can bring in like Washington guys right now, but they don't have the full market of portal guys that, in previous windows were available. So they're kind of just sitting here kind of screwed to the point where their best players can leave and they can't really bring in much talent. And I think this goes back to another major issue in college football is the schedule is just out of whack.
Yeah. And same thing would be like, we'll talk about Harbaugh. Like if he leaves, it'll be the same situation. If he's gone, then they leave for 30 days and they can't bring, essentially these teams just don't know if these guys are going to be here, if their coach is going to be here. So I think the easiest fix, and there's not a whole one solution solves all here, but at least making the portal window maybe started a week later and extended a week at the other end. So, hey, now we're encapsulating the national championship and the teams that at least lost in the semifinals, or, if you give those coaches 72 hours after the national championship to make their move and tell their team and help their program, then you fix at least a little bit of this, because then those teams might know, for at least a couple of days. But yeah, they're definitely in a tough spot where the first window is closed, next one doesn't open for another couple of months. And if their guys leave, one, they're leaving their school, and two, they can't really bring anybody back in to replace them.
And it's going to be even different next year. I mean, this time next year, it's going to be the national championship game because of the expanded playoffs. So there's more opportunity for players to, there's less opportunities for players to leave and enter the portal. And we're going to, have this weird window where the college football season kind of extends into the thick of the NFL playoffs. And I'm hyped for the 12-team playoff. I think it's going to be fun and exciting to watch. I worry about the viewership just because, again, it's going up against the NFL. And also at the end of the day, and this is kind of getting off topic, but there's going to be teams in the playoff, like the team that wins the group of 5, whatever, or some of these 2, maybe even 3-loss Power 5 teams that have no business, playing the number 1 overall, like Ohio State next year or Georgia, and they're just going to get trounced. So, we'll have more teams in it. We could get to the point where it's the one and number 2 team make it to the championship anyway. So that's another, caveat there with the portal. But yeah, Caleb Downs gone, huge loss for Bama.
And he actually said a big reason he went to Ohio State was them hiring Bill O'Brien as the OC.
Did he actually say that?
Well,
there's no way.
He knows the defense will be spending a lot of time on the field.
Yeah, I think I saw that tweet too. Yeah, that was an interesting hire by Ohio State on Thursday. We'll see. I mean, Ryan Day, his whole thing is his play calling expertise, and he's relinquishing that for Bill O'Brien. We'll see.
Bill O'Brien's calling plays.
Yeah, that's what it seems like.
You think that was a top-down decision? Like, hey, you're done calling plays. Bring in who you think the best will be.
I don't know. I can't speculate. I'm not sure. I don't know why he would give it up. I mean, he is a good play caller. I think some of the issues that I have with Day, and probably Ohio State fans have with Day, is just his aggressiveness and not going for 4th and 1s against Michigan when could swing the game early and making those kind of gutsy decisions. But Ohio State was such a good team last year. I mean, they were arguably a top 4 team, could have made the playoff, and I don't know. But either way, they're assembling the Avengers next season. So Downs goes to to Ohio State. Caden Proctor, their starting left tackle. He was a freshman starter, played 13 games, all SEC freshman. He's gone. He was a 5-star and the number 1 offensive tackle in the class of 23.
He's from Iowa. He was the number 1 player he was
Yep.
the best offensive lineman, but also the best player in Iowa, 5-star. I think Iowa was the runner-up. I think he was committed there for a while when he flipped. I don't know where he goes. I could see him flipping back to there, though, now.
Following high school recruiting and seeing the teams that finish second or third in the recruiting process has never been more important than it is right now in college football, because you can commit somewhere, go there for a year, and then obviously enter the portal. And all of a sudden they're bringing up who were the finalists in his recruiting process as a high school player. So yeah, you're right. Caden Proctor right now, he's favored to go to Iowa because of his high school recruiting path. And that'd be a great get for the Hawkeyes. I mean,
so do they have to transfer within the 30-day period? Like they have to go in the portal and leave within that period?
Well, you don't have to leave. You can come back.
Right.
And I think, you don't have to make a decision. Okay. So it's where you just have to enter the portal in the first 30 days. And then, theoretically they could stay in the portal, but just not be able to transfer. I'm not really sure what the process looks like. Like, are you practicing with Alabama? What are you doing? Mm-hmm. But then you have the portal window in April, and they can make a decision then. Mm-hmm. So Caden Proctor, he's in. Isaiah Bond, their leading receiver last year. He transferred to Texas with 2 years of eligibility left. He had 48 receptions, second in yards for Bama last year with 668.
He seemed to go pretty quick. I think Sark, when Saban retired, was licking his chops for a couple of these guys, probably because, what we were just saying, Texas was probably around a lot of these guys in the recruiting process a couple of years ago. I mean, Bond was a pretty quick transfer to Texas.
Yeah, and another SEC, and now Texas is in the SEC, but another SEC wide receiver transferring over to Texas. We saw with Adonai Mitchell last year going over from Georgia. So another big get for Texas. They also get the tight end, Amari Niblack. He entered the portal Sunday, committed to Texas. He was third on the team with 20 receptions for 327 yards. We talked about it in the preview for the Bama Michigan game that their tight ends weren't necessarily the strength of their team, but obviously with Ja'Tavion Sanders going to the NFL for Texas, nice pickup for them heading into next season. Another guy gone from Bama, another productive player for the Tide. Also, the biggest thing with them, though, that they've lost in the portal so far is their defensive backs. Obviously, you have Caleb Downs, Des Ricks, former 5-star. He's going to Texas A&M. He was the number 2 corner in the 2023 class. He has 3 years of eligibility left. Trey Amos, he committed to Ole Miss yesterday. 1 year of eligibility left.
Ole Miss, Lane Kiffin is cleaning up in the portal.
Mm-hmm. Ole Miss is dropping back. Ole Miss and Ohio State right now, or I don't know where they're getting this NIL money from, but they're dropping the bag. Antonio Kite, another DB, redshirt sophomore. He's in the portal. You also have Jameer Grimsley. He was an incoming freshman, 2024 class DB. He's gone. And outside of the DBs, a big one, quarterback Julian Sayin signed with Bama as the number 4 overall player, number 2 overall quarterback in the 2024 class. He already is gone. He's already gone. I mean, you can guess the biggest link right now. It's Ohio State.
Wow.
It's Ohio State. He was in the recruiting process with them. It's interesting that these guys that were enrolled early, signed their NLI early, and were with the team before next fall. They already are burning a transfer before they even, step foot on Bama's campus.
Yeah, he was with them for the Rose Bowl practices?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. So interesting. Tough. That's a big loss. And you mentioned that they brought over Austin Mack from Washington, the big recruit. So that's kind of a replacement there. I'll be interested to see where Sayin ends up, because Ohio State has Aaron Noland, another top-ranked recruit, coming over in as a quarterback freshman next year. So would they want Sayin and him in the same class? I don't know, but either way they're loaded. Be interested. I think right now what I've seen from Sayin is it's between USC and Ohio State. So I think USC has a good guy coming over to start next year in Miller Moss. He looked good in the Holiday Bowl. I'll be curious to watch him next year. But another tough loss for DeBoer, and then also Roydell Williams. He's going to Florida State. And the Knowles, and then linebacker Kendrick Blackshear also transferring over to Texas. So they've gotten absolutely obliterated in the portal, and we can pivot over to Washington and kind of the guys that are entering the portal for them and the Jedd Fisch hire, because there are a lot of guys, Jabbar Mohammed being the big one, cornerback for them, that are in the portal. And obviously DeBoer has a really good chance of landing the guys that he just coached. But yeah, let's pivot over to Jedd Washington going to Washington, or sorry, Jedd Fisch going to Washington. Got a pay raise. He was making $3.4 million at Arizona. Now he's up to 7.5 at Washington, so doubling his pay. He's been around a lot of different places, but what were your initial reactions to Jedd Fisch to Washington?
Before I saw the monetary compensation, I was a little surprised just because, hey, he just tore it up at Washington or at Arizona. They've got a great team coming back and going to the Big 12 where honestly it's a wide open. Like you can just pull a TCU, and if you're the best in the Big 12, you're in the playoff automatically. You get a chance to go to the national championship. A little bit easier schedule, in my opinion, than the Big 10. But certainly when you double your salary, it's hard to turn down $7.5 million from Washington for him. I think a pretty good replacement for Washington. Like he was a hot name in the market, really turned around Arizona like that. Doesn't get me quite as excited as if, obviously if they had re-signed DeBoer for even more money. I mean, he's a good coach. He's kind of bounced around. Looks like he's been like 16 places since 97. He did pretty good at Arizona. He's only 17-22 as a head coach. So I think a solid hire, like doesn't move the needle crazy for me. It'll be hard for him to replicate the success that DeBoer had. Be curious if he brings some Arizona guys with him to Washington or what that looks like. They got a tough schedule going to the Big 10 next year, though.
They very interesting from an Arizona perspective. They had 9 guys enter the portal in like 30 minutes the other day. But importantly, Noah Fafita and Millen, their wide receiver, Fafita being the quarterback, did not enter the portal yet. I think if he can get those guys to come over to Washington, that would be huge because we saw those guys turn around the program last year. Deloria went down early for the Wildcats, and then Fafita stepped in and he just killed it. I mean, and Washington really, really, really flew under the radar last season. No one was really talking about them in a national landscape. We were, talking about them every week as kind of a really fun team to watch that, might not be getting a lot of love, but they finished 10-3 with an Alamo Bowl win over Oklahoma, a good Oklahoma squad that's going to the SEC next year. And Fisch took them from 1-11 a few years ago to that 10-3 season this past year. So, he did a great job with that program, turning it into, a relevant team nationwide. I mean, they're going to be top 15 heading into the year next year. I don't know if that's going to be the case with all the guys entering the portal now. But it's important to note that the 3 years he spent at Arizona were the most that he's spent at one stop. And this is a guy that has this weird obsession with Florida. And I don't know if you know, but he went to college at Florida just for the opportunity to potentially work on Steve Spurrier's staff as a graduate assistant in any capacity. So you talk about loyalty and these guys kind of bolting. Washington does a great job for Kalen DeBoer. It's one of those top 10 to 12 teams in the country that can make the playoff every single year. And DeBoer left immediately for Alabama, only after 2 years. There really is no loyalty amongst these coaches anymore. Not that there maybe ever was, and I don't blame anybody for going somewhere that's going to double their salary. Like I would do the same, right? But I think if you're Washington, you're nervous that this guy's going to bolt at, because there's a very good chance if Billy Napier has another bad year at Florida next year, he bolts, or if he gets fired, Jedd Fisch gets offered that job, he bolts and goes to Florida next year. So if you're Washington, it's kind of this never-ending process of, we got to lock our guys down. And they offered DeBoer an extension last November, and he didn't take it. And I think it's really true of all schools now. You got to lock your guys down. You got to lock your players down. You got to re-recruit them every year. You got to re-recruit your coach every year. And there's just a lot of pressure to keep these guys where they are.
Yeah. I mean, I was shocked at DeBoer. I wonder what he got offered from Washington, because I'm sure it was a lot of money, at Thanksgiving time. And then every week they won, I'm sure that number just kept going up. And then eventually they made a national championship, and he was just the biggest name on the market. Jedd Fisch out there, the Florida connection, man. Yeah. Who knows? He would bolt, I'm sure, for that opportunity if he got in a year or two, whatever it is. But yeah, I mean, solid hire for UW. Like you said, if you can bring Fafita and McMillan in, that's huge. We'll see. I mean, Washington's already losing some guys in the portal. We'll see who stays and what that team looks like and transitioning into the Big 10. Well, I'll just be curious. Like it's so hard to compete now. And like you said, re-recruiting your coaches, players every year, incoming recruits. I'll be curious what happens with them.
Yeah, he is a great recruiter. Does a really good job on the trail. Was able to establish a presence on the West Coast for Arizona in high school recruiting. He focuses on developing those high school guys and then kind of filling in the gaps through the portal. So I think UW is a destination place to go for players. I mean, they're just playing in the national championship game.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's a great school. You're going to the Big Ten. You're playing big games, a lot of viewership. They have good NAL up there. Seattle's a great place to live. Like it's a great job for Fisch. I would have loved to see him in Arizona. Now I know they have some issues with their athletic office right now and kind of some money issues going on. You can read it. I don't have like the specific details, but you can kind of read into that if you want on your own. But they have some issues there, so I understand him kind of bolting. And he spent time on Harbaugh's staff at Michigan as well, so he's a good coach. But I just think my biggest thing for him is he very well could bolt right away if he gets that Florida job. So that'll be interesting to watch. And you're right. Washington has had a ton of guys enter the portal. Biggest name, Jabbar Mahab in the corner, but also Will Rogers, the quarterback. Kind of an end of an era at UW and Will Rogers there.
Got to get a Will Rogers Washington jersey.
Yeah,
where does he go, though?
I have no idea.
And to your point, now he's stuck in the spot where he just got recruited by DeBoer to go to Washington. He thinks he's locked in. He's all set to start next year. Boom, he's back in the portal. And all these spots have been taken probably of, his second choices of big Power 5 programs.
I mean, he could, Michigan, if they don't want to go with the Alex Orji starter next year. I think Michigan probably will take a guy in the portal next year, maybe after spring ball, kind of feel it out there and then go out and get a guy in the portal. I think that could be a destination. I mean, Will Rogers is fine. He's not a game breaker. He's not a JJ McCarthy by any stretch of the imagination. I wouldn't be like super hyped, but I think he could have stayed at Arizona or at Washington and
I guess he could still. I guess it'll depend what happens with Fafita. Yeah,
I'd be really curious to see. I hope just because Washington had been so irrelevant or Arizona had been so irrelevant, I would love for Fafita and McMillan to stay there and then be good again. They did lose Jonah Coleman to the portal, their running back, which was a tough loss. Mm-hmm. And then Washington lost pretty much all of their offensive linemen. Parker Brailsford, Julius Bielo, Nate Kalepo, 3 big offensive linemen. And they won the Joe Moore Award for the best offensive line in the country last year. So their depleted offensive line, I think it was pretty like, if not all of their offensive starters are gone, Penix and all those wide receivers, and then the offensive line, Dylan Johnson, the running back, they're all gone. Like they're going to be very depleted. It's going to be a completely new look Washington team next year.
It's one of the toughest things when you have such a dream season that all comes together perfectly with older veterans and everything clicking. It's always so sad, right away after it's like, man, what a season. Then you look and it's like all these guys graduated or they're in the portal or whatever, or leaving early for the draft. And it's just sad because it'll be so hard to replicate the success and the, continuity of those guys in that team.
Yeah. I mean, I felt that as a Michigan fan and we won the thing, like just seeing like basically like 75% of the production from last year going to the draft. And it was expected, obviously a senior laden team. But it still sucks just because like you love, and I'm sure Washington fans feel the same way. Like you love watching those guys play. They were there for a couple years, if not 2-3 years, watching these guys play and grow up and develop and make it to the top, make it to the natty. And then now they're pretty much all gone. Luckily, Michigan will be returning some guys, and I don't know, fingers crossed. We'll talk about Harbaugh later. Hopefully he stays as well. But yeah, Washington, interesting spot. They're going to Big Ten, so there's a lot of money involved there. I think they will recover. And Jedd Fisch is a good hire. It's just a matter of him staying there. And then to kind of close the gap on the portal, on the coaching carousel, Brent Brennan to Arizona. He comes over from San Jose State. He went 34-48 as a head coach there. He was 7-6 last year. They were actually, within a computer decision of making the Mountain West Championship game last year. So he's the guy that UA decided to fill Fisch's spot with. He was actually a candidate for that job, the Arizona job, before or against Fisch when he got hired in 2020. So he's kind of a guy that's been floated for Power 5 jobs for a few years here now, and he finally gets one going to Arizona and taking over there.
Yeah, they got hot late. Them and Boise State in the Mountain West. They had a really good team. So I like the hire for Arizona. They're looking for a guy from the group of 5. Clearly they didn't know Fisch was going to leave until the last minute here. So, maybe the pool is a little bit lower, but obviously a guy that looked at a couple years ago, he's had solid success at San Jose State. Probably didn't cost. You mentioned the monetary thing going with their academic department. Probably wasn't as expensive as other people. So I like the hire for them. I think it'll be solid down there and a good job getting their guy pretty quick after Fisch left.
Really quick. And I was reading that their athletic director kind of got the process started when he saw that DeBoer went to Alabama and kind of figured that Fisch was going to be a guy that was going to be floated for that job. So it's a college football's 24/7 process now,
I'd be
man.
thinking a step ahead, man. It's crazy.
Yeah. So good hire for Arizona. I think if they can retain some of that talent, they'll be good again next year. Obviously, they've had a few guys enter the portal, but just keeping those big names in the program. We can talk about Harbaugh now. I mean, you want to talk about Harbaugh? It's kind of the outside of DeBoer in Alabama and
Biggest
maybe some of the
domino
portal,
left.
biggest story. Honestly, one of the biggest stories in the NFL, and if not the biggest story in college football right now, is what is Jim Harbaugh, the defending national champion, going to do? And he's interviewed with the Chargers. So he interviewed with the Chargers on Monday. And then he interviewed with the Falcons, I believe, on Tuesday or Wednesday of this week. He's got a second interview scheduled with Falcons next week. Now, it seems like the Chargers are more likely of the two. The Falcons seem to be in on Bill Belichick as their guy. They scheduled a second interview with him next week as well. And right now, as things stand, the vibe seems to be more like the 2021 cycle when the Vikings were interviewing Harbaugh and he pursued that job. Eventually, things kind of fell through. I'm not exactly sure why, but just seemed like there wasn't cohesion there, and they ended up going with what's his name, Kevin O'Connell. Yeah. Seems like that's more of the vibe where he's pursuing these NFL jobs rather than 2022 when kind of the Broncos pursued him last offseason. So he wants an NFL job. He also, interesting, like he is negotiating a contract right now with Michigan, or maybe not right now, but he has been in talks with Michigan for an extension. And the biggest thing that's holding it up right now is he wants immunity from any, NCAA. He wants protection from these NCAA rulings that might come down on Michigan. He doesn't want to be able to be fired with cause. He wants protection from that. And this is something similar to, like, talk about Kansas basketball. Bill Self got a lifetime contract, and they gave him protection from the NCAA investigation that they were under at the time. So, and he's professed his innocence, right, this whole time. But I'm curious your thoughts on where things stand with Harbaugh.
Yeah, I mean, it gives me the same vibes that 2021 cycle with the Vikings. And to your point, I think the Falcons are leaning towards Belichick. And then there's the Chargers, who there's a lot of good candidates still out there in the coaching cycle. So I think the Chargers make the most sense to me if he does leave. It'd be going there and looking at getting Herbert as your quarterback. So that's what I think. If he does go in the NFL, I still think he's going to stay. And if I'm Michigan, I'd give him that lifetime deal. And maybe you put something where he's not going to get fired, but maybe there's a monetary drop if he is suspended or whatever happens there, and he agrees to that. And you've got the coaches around him. You can clearly bring in the right guys. Look at this past season. He missed half the year coaching, and they still won the national championship. So if you can keep a couple of those guys or bring in the right ones to replace, like Jerome Moore and Jesse Minter, if they leave, like, hey, he's got the right guys to, be in place if he can't coach for a game or two. So I would do it. I'm curious your thoughts as a Michigan fan. If you're like, hey, like, let's give him that. Like, I feel like he's earned it. He's a Michigan man, brought him back to the mountaintop. He recruits well. He's everything that program needs. I still feel like he's going to stay. And, maybe is he chasing more money in the NFL? Like, Michigan's going to offer him a lot of money. So is it like, he wants an extra couple million, but where does the line, where do you draw the line?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if I was in charge of the process, I would give him the lifetime contract. That's easier said than, like, from a fan perspective. I'm not the one that has to deal with the regents and the university, the people that are actually paying the contract. So easy for me to say. I would love to see him back. The one thing that annoys me and annoys Michigan fans is we do this every single offseason. Yeah. And it finally worked out this year where we won a national championship. And if there was ever an offseason to do it and to leave, it would be now, and we would understand. And he wants to win that Super Bowl. I understand that desire, and it's totally valid. He's one of the few coaches in all of football that has had success at both levels. Obviously, Pete Carroll is the biggest one. Won a national title at USC, won a Super Bowl with the Seahawks. He'd be one of the select few that has done so well at both levels. He's making $8.2 million at Michigan right now, and the highest paid coach in the NFL last year was $20 million, and that was Bill Belichick. Sean Payton making $18 million with the Broncos. Luis is in the chat right now. Luis, JJ is gone. JJ left. But it's a question of how, and because I really do think it's down to the Chargers or coming back. how much are the Chargers willing to pay him? And I think a big thing to note, and it's interesting to see, is the guys that the Chargers have interviewed for their GM role. And kind of the rumor right now is that Harbaugh maybe will want some control in some of the decisions being made, or maybe even just control over who the GM is that they select. And a lot of the guys that the Chargers have interviewed for their GM spot have ties to Harbaugh. Not all of them. But Ed Dobbs, Joe Horitz, Ian Cunningham, Brandon Brown, all 4 of those guys have connections to either Jim or John Harbaugh. And I think maybe if they hire one of those guys, we might see Harbaugh go. If they don't, I mean, he might not want, to go work for a GM that he doesn't have any connection with. So it's interesting. Just keep an eye on that search as well.
Yeah, I think there's a domino effect there. I just still think he comes back. Like, I think he goes to Michigan. If he does leave, it's got to be Sharon Moore. Like, give him a pay bump, give him the head coach job. That's an immediate, hey, Harbaugh's gone. Like, that's got to be the next guy.
Yeah, and before we get to that, I don't think the Chargers are as great of a job as people might be making it out to be. You're in cap hell. You have aging guys, Austin Eckler, Keenan Allen. They're on the wrong side of their career. They're on the downswing.
Gone after this year too.
Yeah, they don't have a lot of money to spend. They're known for being cheap. On top of that, in my opinion, I mean, I think the Chargers are kind of a cursed franchise. They have no fans in LA. All of their fans were in San Diego, and they're probably not fans anymore because the team left. No one goes to their games. Every single home game is a road game for them because the away fans see it as a trip to go to LA, or there's just, a lot of Raiders fans or whatever in Los Angeles versus Chargers fans. They don't have no fan base. Why would you want to leave? And yes, you have Justin Herbert, who's the franchise quarterback. But again, like Justin Herbert, he's great, but we haven't seen him really win. Like, he hasn't won in his career, even with great rosters. So are the Chargers really that good of a job? I don't know. Like, you're a legend, an icon. Everyone loves you at Michigan, and you go to the Chargers where it's kind of just like a desolate, like lifeless franchise.
And you're in a division that has Patrick Mahomes every single year. So they're going to be the favorites in the AFC West. But, I mean, it's not as good of a job as it's made out to be. I mean, the sole reason is it's Justin Herbert. Like, you evaluate him, you're like, if Harbaugh's like, that's my guy, that's my Super Bowl quarterback, boom, he goes. But if he's like, like Herbert's not really my guy, it's not really a reason to go then, like in terms of ownership, the fan base, the team, guys leaving. It's not the same as it's kind of made out to be for the Chargers. So I just still think if they can get it done with him to bring him back at Michigan.
What about, for me, I think a better job is Washington. And Luis and I have talked about this. Luis is in the chat right now. Washington, you have a top 5 pick. I think they have 3 or 4, whatever. New ownership.
Yeah, let me look it up.
New ownership. They have tons of cap space. Probably going to get a new stadium. They actually have a fan base. You have your pick of.
They have the second overall pick.
They have number 2? Bears and then
2.
Oh, geez. Okay.
So they'll get a quarterback.
They have their pick. I mean, he could pick whoever he wants. He could go with. I think JJ at number 2 would be absolutely diabolical. They could go out and get Jane Daniels, Penix, or like a Drake May. I think Jane Daniels might be a little bit lower right now, but I think he's going to have a killer combine. He's going to have a killer pro day, and he's going to be like an Anthony Richardson type guy that's going to shoot up draft board. Yeah, totally. I mean, he won the damn Heisman last year. So I think Washington's a better job, and he hasn't interviewed for it yet. He hasn't interviewed for it at all. But I think Washington's a better situation long term. And LA might maybe be a better situation short term. I don't even know. I don't really feel great about any of these openings. And it seems like, Atlanta, that's probably the best just in terms of talent right now. I think they're going to go with Belichick. So he's kind of in a tough spot. It might be a very similar situation to previous interview processes where he goes through it. Maybe he doesn't get the offer immediately, and none of these jobs really are that great.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, to your point, I think Washington, it gives you that control essentially to come in and be like, hey, we got the 2 pick, take our quarterback or trade back, get assets, pick a different quarterback. The best chance to come in and go your way immediately. So we'll see. Interesting that they have. I don't think they've started hiring or interviewing anybody, right?
No, I think they have, but it's I haven't
Early.
seen the names. They have been interviewing people.
Okay. Yeah,
Um,
I'll be curious to see. I mean, Harbaugh's got the time, so if these teams want to get rolling, they got to get rolling. I mean, there's
yeah,
other stuff out there. Luis put in the chat. Tennessee's out there. Seattle technically is open right now, so there's a few openings to take a look at.
yeah, I forgot about Seattle. And then just in terms of a Harbaugh replacement, if it does happen, I think you're right that Sharon Moore will probably get the job, but I don't think it would be a bad idea for Michigan to look at other options. You know,
There's guys who would probably leave in a heartbeat to go take that job. I would just give it. I'm giving it to Moore. He's proven it. He's been there. The guys probably like him on the staff. He's part of the recruiting, process there still. So I'm going with him, but can't hurt. There's probably guys out there that we would never think would leave their current job, and Michigan's probably their number one.
right. And I do think that the culture, and we've talked about this on previous pods, the culture that Michigan's built under Jim Harbaugh and the staff, it's not just Harbaugh. They've established a great culture, and why would you want to bring in an outside guy right now when everything's going so well? And it's so late in the process as well. Why would you want to bring in a guy that's going to try to establish his own culture when everything's working for Michigan right now? Yeah. So I think Moore makes sense. I think from a Michigan perspective, they might not be wanting to pay this Harbaugh contract. They'd love to pay more, half of what Harbaugh's making right now, like $4 million a year instead of $8 million. And he probably will get like 11 or 12 if he re-signs with Michigan.
Yeah.
So Moore is a cheaper option. He's a great coach. And he won the biggest games of the year down the stretch. I think a key note of that is that Harbaugh was with the team Monday through Friday. He just didn't coach the game itself. So a lot of what, Michigan was doing on game day was led by Harbaugh. But Harbaugh is, he's been saying it for years. He loves leaning on his assistants, and he does have a great assistant staff. I really hope Minter doesn't leave. Apparently Minter is the favorite for the Jaguars defensive coordinator job right now. I think Minter, man, he was so good for Michigan last year. And Luis said Sharon Moore is going to get called third base by Ohio State fans if it happens. Kind of going back to Ryan Day, Harbaugh calling Ryan Day third base. But I think the key note there is Jim Harbaugh in that quote said a lot of people were born on third base and think they hit a triple, meaning that they think they actually it built the program and established it. Sharon Moore knows that if he does take over, that what he built or what he has was built by Harbaugh. And he was also part of building the team. He was an assistant as well. Not that Ryan Day was an assistant at Ohio State too, but anyway, let's move on. Any final thoughts on Harbaugh and Michigan and their coaching search?
It could go either way, man. I think we don't know that, he's an enigma and he'll do what he wants to do. And, money's a factor, but it's not the number one thing. It's what he wants and the program. So we'll see. I'm curious to see what he does. My prediction is he stays and he gets a pay bump, but it could be anywhere, man.
Yeah. Nobody knows anything right now. There is, no resolution in sight right now, and this thing could drag on. So we'll see. Before we get out, let's just talk about some of the NFL draft entrants. Obviously, the deadline was last Monday, and some of the guys that are returning, coming back to play another year of college football. Biggest name, obviously, that entered the draft was Caleb Williams. He waited until the very last day to do so, the USC quarterback. Hope the Bears pick him. At this point, I've actually kind of done a 180. I think the Bears, if they can trade Fields, get a first-round pick in return, maybe to the Falcons or something, and get Caleb Williams. I think he is a generational talent. He has all of the intangibles, crazy arm, crazy legs. I think a big knock on him, and we'll see this probably in the draft process, people that are trying to knock him down, was the fact that he maybe tried to do a little bit too much at USC. But so much of that, and we talked about that all years, their offensive line sucked. Their defense sucks. He wasn't in the best situation at all. But just the raw talent on him, I think he's QB1. I think he's going to be the first overall pick.
Yeah, I think he's got to be you'll evaluate the other guys in the draft here and you'll look at other options, but it'd be hard to not take him and then look back in a couple of years if he blows up and be like, we had our chance, at the number one pick. And we'll see what happens, but I think it's also a smokescreen to drop interest and maybe more capital. But I think you got to go Williams if you're going number one.
You don't want to be the GM that traded the pick that got you Caleb Williams, or you don't want to be the guy that just passed on him altogether and pick someone else at number 1.
Yeah.
I think Chicago has to either they have to get something for this pick. They can't just, draft Caleb Williams and keep Justin Fields on the roster. They have to trade Justin Fields, get a ton of picks in return, or trade the pick and get a ton of picks in return. They can't just keep it simple. And I think Ryan Poles, the GM, is they pulled off a great trade with Carolina last year, so I think he's gonna work his magic. Another one, tough one for me going to the draft, JJ McCarthy. I think JJ is going to be a guy that would really benefit from sitting for a year or two, kind of like Jordan Love did in Green Bay, and kind of learning behind a veteran quarterback. I think he's going to get knocked in the draft process by a lot of people that didn't watch Michigan this year because Michigan was a run first team. They weren't focused on just throwing the ball all over the field like Ohio State or an LSU. But he made some really great throws this year. He has a great arm. I think of that pass that he made to Roman Wilson, the touchdown in the Ohio State game. I think of the pass to Roman Wilson in the national championship game on that post route. Also had a nice pass to Colson Loveland in the natty. He made a lot of great throws when he needed to this year. He has the talent. I think he just needs to season it and develop it and sit as a backup for a few years and then start. He should not be thrusted into a starting position.
I mean, he's a guy I'd love to take, third. If he drop, I wouldn't take him the first or second round, but third, fourth, if he's sitting there, boom. If you got a starter and you're maybe he's on the last 1-2 years of his deal, looking towards the future, take him, let him sit, develop behind somebody. Not a guy that I'd take and throw in this year as the starter, but certainly a guy who come in, learn, maybe compete for the job. And wouldn't it be the worst thing to just let him sit? Yeah.
I'd be curious to see. I think he ends up going either late first or kind of somewhere in the second round, maybe early second. Just depends on, there's a lot of teams that need quarterbacks right now. There's not many good quarterbacks in the NFL, and this is a loaded class, which, maybe if there was any hope for him coming back, it was just that, this class is loaded. If he comes back next year, the quarterback class next year in the draft is going to be Quinn Ewers as kind of the lead guy. Shedeur Sanders, he maybe would have been, first half of the first round next year, maybe QB1 even if he had a great year. But he decides to go and can't blame him. Michigan legend, 27-1, 28-1 as a starter. Natty, 3-time Big Ten champion. Beat Ohio State every single time. Could not ask for more from him. So wish him nothing but the best in the NFL. He's a Michigan legend, him and Corum and all those guys. So shout out to JJ. Marvin Harrison Jr., the Ohio State wide receiver, pretty much the only Ohio State guy that's actually going to the draft next year.
Yeah.
He's going to be wide receiver 1. And no, not really a surprise there, but he's going to be fun to watch wherever he ends up in the league.
Yeah, he'll be top 5. Probably, I'd take him at 3. If you need a wide out, he's my guy there.
Yeah, I think him and a dude my thing with wide receivers is, and a lot of people are saying the Bears should just pick Marvin Harrison Jr. at number 1. I get that, but having a great quarterback, and I think Caleb Williams can be great. Having a great quarterback means so much more than having a great wide receiver. Think of how many great wide receivers play on middling to bad teams. I think of Justin Jefferson. He's one of the best wide receivers in the league. The Vikings haven't been great. And there's not many truly great quarterbacks that just play on bad teams all the time, especially in this modern era of football. So a great quarterback can change your roster way more than
CJ Stroud.
Yeah. Their knock on him, or a knock on the Texans this year, was heading into the season was, Stroud could be good, but there's just no talent around him. There's no wide receivers. Look what he did with Nico Collins and Tank Dell this year. He turned that franchise around single-handedly. So just having a great quarterback, and I think the Bears have a good infrastructure already, just in terms of roster, that they could be good next year with Caleb Williams at the helm. So Marvin Harrison, he's going to be wide receiver 1, but I don't think he should be. I don't think you can justify picking a wide receiver at 1 or 2. I think 3, 4, 5 is where he'll end up. But we're going to do more NFL draft stuff, as we lead up to it with Luis. Should be fun.
Yeah.
Terry and Arnold. What'd you say? Sorry.
I was just saying 100%. I think I go 3 with him. He's that type of talent.
Yeah. And then Terrion Arnold and Kool-Aid McKinstry, two more Alabama DBs, are gone from the roster. Terrion Arnold is going to be a first rounder. Kool-Aid, maybe a second round guy. But and then returning guys, Quinn Ewers. I wouldn't say I was surprised. I wouldn't say I was too surprised.
Just all the reports were him leaning towards that. He could have gone, though, and been a third-round pick and sat for a year or something. But he's got the potential. If he tears it up next year, you're talking first round, top 10 pick.
Yeah, he's got the arm talent. I'll be curious to see if Arch Manning decides to stay and sit another year at Texas.
I think he does.
Yeah, he
I
probably
feel like he would
does.
have left by now.
Yeah, I mean, you're probably right. Maybe he's going to see how spring ball goes and then maybe enter the portal then. But another year as a backup, and then ideally, he would start his junior year, and then can you go pro after 1 year as a starter, or does he? I mean, we don't even know how good this guy is. We haven't really seen him play much at all. He was the number one recruit in the country in his class, though. So interesting note there on Ewers. Ollie Gordon, running back from Oklahoma State, he's coming back. Big pickup for Oklahoma State, getting him back. He was electric this year. And Oklahoma State started out so bad. I mean, they lost to South Alabama and then just turned their season around. Ended up winning the Texas Bowl against Texas A&M. So he's back.
Didn't Alan Bowman get granted another year too?
I think so. I can look it up real quick, but that'd be.
I mean, you bring back your quarterback and running back with the season they had. That's pretty good.
Yeah, he did. He did grant. He got granted an eligibility extension. I think
that's big for them going into next year without Oklahoma and Texas in the Big 12.
Yeah, that's the point. And we'll talk about this as we get into next year. Is the Big 12 is weak, and you can run the table in the Big 12 next year if you got the right schedule. There's not many big names on there, so that's huge for Oklahoma State. I think Utah is probably going to be the best team preseason in that conference, but the Big 12 is wide open. I mean, we could see a Kansas in the playoff next year theoretically, so be fun to watch that. Cam Ward seemed like he was going to go to the NFL, but he committed to the U. Going over from Wazoo.
I think he was floating around there. I'm sure he just got feedback and evaluations that he was like, hey, I'm going to take the NIL money, go to the U. And yeah, we'll see what happens down there. They brought in a kid from Albany, Reese Poffenberger, who was supposed to be the starter, and now Cam Ward comes in. So he'll be the guy down there. I'm sure they've guaranteed that spot to him. I'm excited he's going to be staying in college football personally.
Yeah, he had that electric September for Wazoo and then kind of fell off. But I mean, Miami's another one of those programs that's just absolutely splashed in the NIL cash. And it's the same story every single year with Miami. They have tons of talent on that roster.
Yeah.
And they finally have what I consider a high level quarterback. Will they actually do something with it? Remains to be seen. I'll believe it when I see it. ACC is weak, so the path is there for them.
Mm-hmm.
But it'll be interesting to watch. DJU transferred over to Florida State from Oregon State. So obviously the two Pac-2 teams in Wazoo and Oregon State losing a ton of talent. They lose their quarterbacks. Big get for the Noles. I think he really benefited from getting out of that Clemson system and showing that he is a talented quarterback. Oregon State was a good team this year. So big get for the Noles. They lose a ton of talent. Keon Coleman, Johnny Wilson, their wide receivers, Jedd Fisch, the defensive tackle, they're gone. It's going to be a bit of a rebuilding year probably for the Noles compared to last season, but DJU is a nice get for quarterback.
September 23rd, Florida State at Clemson. I'll be tuning into that one.
Ooh, he goes back to Death Valley, and
they wrote him off, man.
Yeah,
they wrote him off. Yeah. He was the reason they lost any games they lost. He's a good quarterback. You said at Oregon State how he played up there in the Pac-12, and now he's going down to Florida State. I'm excited to see him, man, especially going back up against Dabo.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to see how he gets received at Clemson. But yeah, Florida State probably take a step back next year, but good get for them. Carson Beck back to Georgia. I think that was probably expected, but I think he has the talent to be in this year's NFL draft.
Senior already.
I know.
He's going to be good next year.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they lose Brock Bowers to the draft, but
they got guys there. They got guys.
And the big thing with them this year, they were still really good. 12-0 in the regular season, lost in the SEC title game. Is
series from being undefeated back in the championship. So,
and they were young. They were really young. So they're bringing a lot of guys back, and they're deep, well coached. Bringing back their quarterback, year 2 as a starter. It feels like Ohio State and Georgia are kind of the class of college football next year. And we can talk about these guys that are coming back to Ohio State that could have gone to the pros.
Man, what are their NIL deals looking like?
There's rumors that they're spending over like $15 million on this team next year in NIL. Yeah. Yeah, and I'm sure not all of it is being done properly. Like there's no way. But yeah, Travion Henderson back, the running back. Denzel Burke, the star corner, could have been a round 1, round 2 pick. Emeka Buka, wide receiver. Jack Sawyer, JTT, defensive end. Lathan Ransom, the safety. Jordan Hancock, Ty Hamilton. They're all back. It's very similar to what Michigan was last year, bringing back all their seniors. I think Ohio State and Georgia are the clear favorites for the Natty next year. My thing with Ohio State, and we've talked about it before, is just the culture. What is that culture going to look like? Where, sure, it's cool, you can bring in all these guys and pay a fortune for them, but how many of them are there for Ohio State when they're really just chasing the NIL bag? They're chasing the biggest payday that they can get. There's been rumors that maybe the Ohio State locker room wasn't the best. They bring in Quinshon Judkins, a transfer from Ole Miss. Apparently, he maybe was a little bit of a locker room cancer in Oxford, and I don't know. It'd be interesting. It's easier said than done to bring in a ton of transfers and expect them to produce right away when you're not familiar with the system. You're not familiar with just being at Ohio State. It's hard. We haven't seen it's like a full team just kind of built in the transfer portal and go out and win a title. So I'll be curious to see how they kind of come together as a team next year. And actually,
I can't believe something like JTT, Travion Henderson, who borderline might have been the best running back in this draft. Don't know where he would have gone, but a lot of these guys, Emeka Buka, I was surprised he stayed. So they're going to have quite the team. A lot's going to be on the shoulders of Will Howard if he's the starting guy for them transferring from K-State. You got to have the right quarterback in place. So they're going to have all the talent in the world, though, and all the tools for him to succeed. And Bill O.B. coming in as the OC. So we'll see, man. The expectation is certainly to beat Michigan and make the playoff and go to the national championship next season.
No excuses next year. I think there is so much pressure on that team next year. If they lose one game, Day might be gone. There's so much pressure. If they lose to Michigan again,
they can't. Nope, he's gone if they lose Michigan.
We didn't even talk. They brought in Jeremiah Smith, the number 1 recruit in the country as a high schooler, wide receiver. He's apparently better than Marvin Harrison Jr. They got Brendan Ennis. They have so much talent, but that's this. It's not like the Ohio State teams of old haven't had talent. They are one of these Georgia, Alabama level teams that recruit at the highest of high levels. It's just a matter of actually going out and doing it and executing on the field. I don't know if bringing in Bill O.B. is the best offensive coordinator.
Not going to move the needle.
I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. But they're a team to watch next year for sure. And then Shedeur Sanders, no surprise. If you told me in September, I would have been surprised. But
he was getting billed as a top 10 pick.
Yeah, he was.
I think that fell off, the last 6 weeks of the season. Yeah. So I have no idea where he would have gotten the draft if somebody went high on him or if he just drops all the way. So I like him coming back. In terms of popularity and NIL, they've got one of the best packages with his dad, Dion, and Shedeur. So I like him going back, especially going to the Big 12, man. You never know with them next year.
I know. And a lot of people are writing them off they're going to be 6-6. They're going to be maybe 7-5. But why? Shedeur's electric. Travis Hunter's back. Yep. They brought in the top offensive lineman recruit. They could be good. And the Pac-12, the Big 12, like we said,
too.
Wide open, man. It's wide open. They could be relevant nationally next year. And my thing with Shedeur is I'm going to be very interested to see who's the quarterback at Colorado when he goes to the pros. And it's not Dion's son. Who do they go with?
Yeah.
Who's that first QB?
Yeah, how does he recruit? Mm-hmm. I don't know who's on the roster right now, but it's you need a big-time recruit.
Yeah. So it'll be another portal guy probably next offseason. And then you have your Chuba Purdy.
Yeah, Brock Purdy's little bro going to San Jose State. Threw him on there. There's a lot of guys in the transfer portal that have moved, especially quarterbacks like Aiden Childs, the big recruit at Oregon State, followed Jonathan Smith to Michigan State. Malik Murphy's at Duke. Malachi Nelson, former 5-star, going to Boise State.
That was a surprise.
Yeah.
He was at USC. He was the top guy. And after 1 year, he's going – we saw how well Miller Moss played in the Holiday Bowl, and he looks like the guy. But he's going to Boise State.
Yeah.
He was the guy.
That's pretty crazy. Brock Vandegrift, former 5-star at Georgia, he's going to Kentucky, which Kentucky I kind of like. They just get these guys every year.
It's a nice get for Kentucky. I think he'll be better than Devin Leary, the guy they had last year. They retained their coach who was linked with the A&M job. Maybe seemed like he really wanted that job and was like 1 foot out and decided to stay. Maybe they didn't offer them the job, but I mean, we saw Carson Beck come in at Georgia and start in his junior year last year and was really good. Brock Vandagriff has that recruiting pedigree. It's not like, Georgia's loaded at quarterback. Stetson Bennett, I'll continue to say he was a really good college quarterback.
Yep.
He was behind some good players. So who knows? Maybe he works out for Kentucky next year too.
Yeah. So a lot of guys in the portal, a lot of guys moving from places. I think the Judkins one was huge going from Ole Miss. They did essentially perfect in the portal outside of him, losing him. But that team's going to be good with Dart coming back and all the guys they brought in on offense and defense.
Yeah, I posted a way too early top 10 yesterday on the Instagram, and I had Ole Miss 4th. I want to say I had Georgia 1, Ohio State 2. That was pre Caleb Downs news. I think I would put Ohio State 1 right now, and then Georgia at number 2. I had Michigan 6. I put Utah at 9 and Notre Dame at 10. If you look at Notre Dame's schedule next year, they bring in Riley Leonard at quarterback from Duke. They have the easiest schedule. They have
and they don't have to win a conference championship.
Right. They don't have that
They're built for the 12-team playoff. They're built to get in there every single year.
It'll be really interesting to see what happens if, Notre Dame's in that conversation and then the committee leaves them out because they don't have a conference title. Like that could it did never happen in the 4-team era. Somehow it didn't happen. But if that happens in the 12-team era, they got to join a conference, but they're basically in the ACC with the schedule they play, but their schedule is so easy. I mean, they should be in the playoff next year.
That's got to be the expectation for that fan base for sure.
Yeah. So that's it. You got anything else before we get out of here today?
That's it, man. Most of the dominoes have fallen, but obviously your guy, Big Jim, he's the biggest one still left to go. See what happens to some of the guys from the Alabama and Washington teams in terms of the portal. And obviously, we'll look at next season with coaches, players, once the teams are all settled in. But yeah, I mean, it's crazy with the NIL, like the Wild West of everything changing. I mean, dude, I just want NCAA football.
Oh,
in fact, they still haven't announced it.
I know. And apparently they had a release date, but apparently that wasn't official from EA Sports. It was some guy leaked it.
Just put it out.
I know. What are you doing? What are you doing in the college football offseason?
I don't know. I've been skiing a ton just personally, so I've been doing a lot of that. But yeah, tracking all this, and we can do our NFL predictions, man.
Oh yeah, let's do that. Let's do that.
What do you got in the Super Bowl?
Game start. Well, let's do the division round because we got games this weekend. Let's do
who you got.
Who you got? I got. So it's Texans versus Ravens. I got Ravens, but I think the Texans cover the 9.5. It is 10-point spread.
I got Ravens, and I do think they cover, and it's worth a sprinkle, man. It would. CJ Stroud and the Texans are Washington. It's like, hey, you stop counting them out. Like they've done it all season. They've proven they can do it. Like, there's no reason for them not to be like, we're the big underdog. Bet on us. Like we missed it with Washington, so I think CJ might have one more in him.
And we see it year after year is having that bye week and really like 3 weeks off because these guys didn't play in week 18. It's a long time, man. There's rust. I mean, we saw it how many years with the Packers and Aaron Rodgers getting that 1 seed, getting a bye, and coming up short early in the playoffs. Yeah. So I think the Ravens squeak by, but Texans cover, so we're aligned there. What about Packers Niners?
I'm on Niners, man. They're a juggernaut.
Big?
I think they cover 10.5. What's the spread? Like 9.5, 10.5?
10, yeah.
I got them covering, dude. They're so good. They're at home, warm weather. I think they get rolling with CMC. Dude, CMC is like minus 340 to score a touchdown.
Why would anyone – why would you bet that? That's such
criminal.
A dumb bet. Yeah, you're like better off betting him.
Like plus 140 to score twice. I'm like, what is this?
That's just terrible value. But people still bet those lines.
Yeah.
Packers defense, not a lot of people are talking about it. Looked like Swiss cheese last weekend against the Cowboys. Let them not back into that game, but let them make it look closer than it was. So I think the Packers can cover the plus 10 because, dude, Jordan Love.
He's they
got to pay him this offseason, which sucks.
That ball on a frozen rope.
He's a stud. Which is why the Bears need to draft Caleb Williams to kind of counter with that, get a franchise guy, and then all of a sudden maybe the NFC North becomes this legit quarterback division. But I like.
Who do you got, Lions or Baker in the Bucks?
So Packers plus 10, but 49ers win, and then I think the Lions get it done, man.
I think they get it done. I think the Bucks magic ran out. They got the Eagles who are reeling at the end of the season.
Mm-hmm.
When the Lions at home, dude, ticket prices, it's the most expensive ever average ticket for a divisional round game, averaging $1,200 a ticket. That place is going to be absolutely electric.
And we saw it last weekend. I was at a Thanksgiving game in 2021 or 2020 when they played the Bears, and that place was electric, and it was a nothing game. So it's hard to bet against the Lions here.
I'm on them, and I want them, dude. I want them to win the championship.
I would love to see them in the Super Bowl. That would be insane. That city would just go bonkers if they made the Super Bowl.
Yeah,
it's going to be tough to get through San Francisco, though, if San Francisco takes care of business against the Packers. I think the Bucks can cover, though, +6. I'm liking the dogs on the spread. I wouldn't bet this.
They're big. The thing is, it's like, man, these are big spreads for the final 8 teams. I get these guys weren't, like the Packers, the Bucks, like the Texans, like they weren't expected to be like this late in the season. I mean, they're here, like they're kind of getting disrespected, man. They remind me of Washington.
Yeah, a lot of disrespect. What about Chiefs Bills Sunday night?
Dude, I can't stand the Chiefs, especially in the playoffs. Mahomes' first time having a road playoff game, a true one. It's up there in Buffalo. Those fans are nuts. It's going to be cold. Obviously, both teams played in the cold last week. I'm on the Bills, though, man. I just think the way they bounced back from when they were written off early in the season, to draw a parallel, I'd say like Alabama, like the coaching job that they get rid of Dorsey and Joe Brady's the OC, that midseason switch, and they've been rolling since then. They were, a couple of games away from missing the playoffs, and here they are as a 2 seed, finally at home versus Mahomes. I'm pulling for Josh Allen, man. I'm kind of just pulling for the Bills and Lions just because they're franchises that don't have that Super Bowl and don't have that success really in the playoffs recently. Mm-hmm. So I'm on the Bills here.
I want the Bills to win, but I'm on Chiefs money line.
Yeah, I know Mahomes is Belichick and Brady, man. It's like, and Saban, like, don't count them out, man, because it don't matter who's around if this guy's a game changer.
Yeah, and I mean the defense it's the best defense they've had under Mahomes. It's Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs. They kind of own the Bills, like it's a rivalry, but they win every time.
They win the bigger games.
Yeah. And I think the NFL is going to do everything in its power to get Taylor Swift in the Super Bowl, man. I mean,
the fix is in.
the refs are going to be on Kansas City's side. They definitely want her, front and center in the Super Bowl. But I want the Bills to win. Like you said, these teams that never win, and the Bills made 4 straight Super Bowls and lost every single one. That's just tough.
I mean, ideally, we'd have Bills Lions in the Super Bowl. I mean, just pure enjoyment for one team and just utter disappointment for the other.
Oh yeah. Because you're right. Like it feels like it's so hard to get there. And when you lose a game like that, it feels like you're never going to make it back.
Never going to get back. Yeah.
I think of Michigan basketball making 2 titles. Biggest one probably for me is Michigan baseball. They were a game away from winning the College World Series against Vanderbilt.
Yeah.
In 2017, 2018. And I don't think they'll ever make it back to that stage. So I think the best Super Bowl, like just in terms of quality, would be Ravens 49ers. Those are probably the 2 best teams. In terms of what I want to see, I think you're right. Like Lions, Bills, any Super Bowl with the Lions in it would be awesome.
Yeah.
Because I mean, we've never seen them win a playoff game in our lifetime. So
I'm pumped too that they get to have another one at home. Just the atmosphere there, and indoors for them, Ford Field. The place is just gonna be rocking like it was last weekend. They knock off Stafford and the Rams, and hey man, I like their chances against the Bucks here. So yeah, give me the Motor City Kitties.
They could get theoretically, if the Packers pull off the upset, they could get another one.
That'd be crazy.
That would be Packers. Lions NFC title game I would not want to be a fan of either of this. I would not want to be a Lions fan in that situation because you have that I feel like Lions fans have that impending doom feeling and that would
this is in the back of their mind at all times.
It's like, oh God, here we go again. The Packers, like we got to play these guys again. They got that's how everyone, like you're an NFC North fan with being the Vikings. Like that's how you feel with Love right now. It's like, really, we got to deal with another one of these guys.
Don't let it happen.
Don't let it happen. But yeah, that's where we stand. You got anything else before we get out?
That's it. A
lot of fun, man. First live stream. Hope everyone enjoyed. Hope everything went smoothly with the YouTube and the Twitter streams, and it was a lot of fun doing it. A lot going on in college football right now, and could have another big domino to fall here soon with Harbaugh. So appreciate you, Joe.
Yeah, man, good time chopping it up. We'll be back throughout the offseason too, and you guys got. I'll be jumping on the Luis ones too if you go live stream to the MLB.
Yes, sir. We'll be doing obviously some NFL draft stuff with Luis coming up, and then we'll be ramping up baseball. Weekly baseball pods are back. It's about a month away from spring training games starting, a couple weeks away from pitchers and catchers reporting. So the weather's not turning here in Chicago, but the vibes are. Baseball is around the corner.
It's coming back, man. It's coming back.
All right, man. Enjoy the skiing out there in Denver. And thank you all for listening. And we'll catch you guys on the next stream, the next podcast. Peace out.